great leaders are honest, competent, inspiring, forward-looking individuals and choose to be poised, growth-oriented, conscientious competitors who positively impact people and organizations in order to achieve mission-driven results that exceed expectations.
Welcome to Game Changers, Athlete Edition. I'm Kortney Harmon, a former Division I softball pitcher turned high-performance business coach who knows what it takes to translate athletic mindset into real-world success.
And I'm Julie Jones, a Hall of Famer and former Division I head coach with more than 20 years of experience turned mental performance coach. Together, we bridge the gap between elite athletics and lifelong achievement, helping you unlock your full potential on and off the field. This podcast is your go-to source for inspiration, motivation, amazing guests, and actionable insights to help you elevate your game.
Welcome back to Game Changers, the Athlete Edition podcast. I'm Kortney Harmon, and I am so excited to talk today as we have a very special guest. And we're going to be focusing on leadership development for athletes at every level and working with parents to guide them to help develop their leadership and their athletes. So today we're so excited to welcome Dr. Jason Roani. He is an expert in athlete leadership development. He truly understands that true leadership isn't about titles, it's about influence. In this powerful conversation, we're going to unpack so many tools athletes can implement immediately, whether you're team captains or not. So Jason, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to meet with Julie and I. I'm so excited. I've gotten to see notes and kind of stalk you a little bit. I'm so excited to have you on.
Well, thank you, Kortney, and I really appreciate being on here. When I had a chance to meet Julie Jones, I would say it was sometime last year when both of us were motivational speakers for a Dick's Sporting Goods event in Houston.
That's right.
Within about 2 minutes, I realized that she and I had the capability of speaking for probably 3 to 4 hours straight without there being a pause. And so I hope you take that into account in this podcast, that there could be a part A, a part B, but she and I will continue part C, D, and E after that without question.
I'll try to squeeze in wherever I can. So I love that you guys can take this one. I'll just kind of sit back and be an innocent bystander this time. So Julie, do you want to kick us off as we start this conversation? Maybe you should leave off from the last time you talked for 3 hours.
Well, I'm as excited as you are, probably more, Kortney, to have Dr. Roani, and I'm going to use that to start, Jason, because well-earned. Congratulations on just completing your doctorate program. I know that this was something that was really important to you and so important to the sporting world. You've grown up in a coaching, your whole life has been coaching. Your father was a coach, your brother's a coach, you've been a coach, and you've watched, your family grow through this. Your entire family is involved in athletics, which is really cool. Yes. So, we were at Dick's, and the one thing that I will say before we get started is that Jason, who is the author of Endless Teachable Moments, which we will dive into some today, every student that was at the Dick's, well, I don't know if everyone got, but he was giving these away as prizes. I had nothing. So, however, I did get a book. And I went home. I read it on the plane home. I couldn't wait to dive into it. But Jason, thanks so much for taking the time. One thing that people say is lacking in today's athletes or in today's young people, and of course, we sound like old people when we talk about this, but it comes up time and time again that leadership is a skill that seems to have sort of gone away. When we look at athletes younger than college, in college, after college. Tell us a little bit about how you define leadership. Where do you even begin with leadership?
Well, it's very timely because at the end of my doctorate program, it was a doctorate in education with an emphasis on global sport leadership. One of the most powerful exercises that we had to do is we had to create our own leadership philosophy. And as you know, when you are charged with actually putting that together in a place, that's incredibly difficult. You have to reflect on your entire journey from start to finish, everything that you learned, everything that you were exposed to, and try to get it down to a definition. And I think what's important is and I don't mind with your audience being both youth athletes and parents and coaches and leaders and teachers, beginning with the end in mind. And I think that what I'll do is I'll read the end leadership philosophy as a way of showing how complex that actually is, so that we go through the process of learning how to break that down and build some of those habits along the way that give us the opportunity to be a leader. And so the paper itself ended up being 20 to 25 pages, and there were many aspects of the paper. But in the end, like, we really had to narrow in on the leadership philosophy in the most condensed form that we possibly could. This is a leadership philosophy. This is not the leadership philosophy, which is important context. And so this is going to be very, very high level. But I think it's important to note, I put my leadership philosophy is quite simple in presentation, but years of experience and choices have set it in its current form. Great leaders are honest, competent, inspiring, forward-looking individuals, and choose to be poised, growth-oriented, conscientious competitors who positively impact people and organizations in order to achieve mission-driven results that exceed expectations. So, very high level, right? We should never, ever expect a beginning youth player, adolescent, high school to understand the complexities of that. But to get down to some of the most important words, when I did a leadership conference with about 5 high schools, probably about 2 months ago, I read that to the student athletes, and then I asked them to pick the most important word. And so in groups, they all had, they went through, they said, growth oriented, competent, inspiring, right? They had all the buzzwords that were there until finally we got to the place when somebody says, choose. And I said, yes, that's the most important piece. Now, when you look at the components of honest, competent, inspiring, and forward-looking individuals, or vision-driven individuals, that's just research. That's not something I just came up with. There's been a 5-decade study on characters of admired leaders, and basically asking employees, of all the qualities of every leader that you've come across, and I'm sure you've come across this study from the Leadership Challenge, what are the 4 most important admired characteristics of leaders that you've come across? And the data said honest, competent, inspiring, and forward-looking, or vision-driven. And so I said, I'm not going to go against the research on that. I'm going to say, that seems to be a fact. It's also a really fun exercise to ask people that, what do you think the most important qualities are? And then referencing the research. And then when I put, choose, I said, okay, this is where we choose. Now, the point of choosing is going, what are my core values? What are my standards of behavior? What are my standards of body language? What are my standards of communication? And then trying to figure out, now, how do you actually break that down to youth athletes? And so when I'm speaking to youth athletes, we break it down in a much different way, in which we talk about leadership being just a constant growth and awareness process, in which you aim to be positive and an empowering influence on others through your habits, values, words, skills, and actions. That's still complex right there, right? And so when we talk about youth athletes as leaders, I think that there's a case to be made that coaches or parents or adults should not put pressure on kids to be leaders at a very, very young age, right? Potentially great teammates, right? Potentially those that are developing the habits of responsibility along the way. But to tell a young athlete, you are a leader or you are not a leader, or you need to become a leader. I mean, think about saying that to adults. We have to work really hard to explain what that means, and get down to that particular place. But developing leaders choose to focus on or have some engagement with, or they're an environment that empowers growth and learning over outcomes. And so that constant positive absorption of skill building and teachable moments leads to habits and values that have the potential to make great leaders. Now, there's another process that we can talk about, in which we try to break it down to the most accessible version for youth athletes. And one of the things I've talked about, I think that we all on a daily basis, we we wake up with what I call two beasts. And that's been referenced in different ways when it comes to wolves and so on and so forth. But two beasts, I basically try to have, from a teaching aspect, the first beast is a growth-oriented beast, okay? And one that is, built on poise and toughness and resilience and focus. And then there's the poison beast, which thrives off of or feeds off of faulty ego and arrogance and relevance, insecurity, doubt, the opinion of others, potentially past trauma, likes and clicks and follows, and so on and so forth. So getting down to that place of like the choice, I do think it's worth noting that we have to figure out ways to build the habit of choosing that growth-oriented beast and feeding that. And so with that, like there's a little bit of competition within that we're choosing. We're choosing to compete against the one that's always going to be there. Now more than ever, is it incredibly complex for a youth athlete to navigate those social pressures that exist, and also for us as leaders and coaches to help them navigate something that we didn't experience as kids. And so when it comes to making that choice, there's looking at it from, okay, we're just going to climb the mountain every day. We're going to enter that arena and we're going to climb the mountain. And at the top of the mountain is this really slippery peak. And that's what we call competitive greatness, right? Which is, we're just going to be able to, we're going to be satisfied with doing the very best we're capable of doing, no matter the circumstance. And that's a really difficult place to be there. And so along the way, like, how do we maybe climb the mountain a little bit more today than we did yesterday? We can choose something called conscientiousness, or in a more accessible way, like we can just choose to work hard and we can choose to do our best. And so we just try to do our best today. And maybe that gets us up the mountain. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe we slip down a little bit, but we then choose to figure it out along the way. So as we're climbing that mountain, in that mountain, there's going to be some barriers. There's going to be some adversity. There's going to be some obstacles. And part of our process is going, well, I'm going to just try to choose to I'm going to have fun figuring this out, right? And then as we're figuring that out, we're then learning to apply self-knowledge. Well, yesterday, I didn't figure it out as much as I did today. Or yesterday, I really felt like I climbed the mountain there. So applying that self-knowledge, like, what did I learn from that? And then when we fall, there's the part of just try again. Okay. We're going to choose to climb that mountain again today. We're going to try again. And all of those things help us over time build the habit of overcoming. And at the end of all the leadership philosophy, at the end of all the, the research, what I really come down to is that leaders over time have a growth-oriented mindset in which they're building the habits of overcoming many obstacles that are there along the way. And so as we think about that and we kind of wrap that piece up as parents, as coaches, as leaders, how can we build and facilitate and encourage an environment in which mistakes are a learning process, in which we have the great conversations around those mistakes, in which we are simply just looking at this going, is my child or is my team filled with individuals that have a growth-oriented mindset? They know mistakes are going to happen. They understand what poise is. It's like our proactive mindset going into it, going, hey, we know mistakes are going to happen. We know adversity is going to be there. And then we build a little bit of toughness, which is like, how do we react to that mistake, or even how do we react to that success? And over time, are we building growth-oriented individuals that are put in enough places through sport to build the habit of overcoming?
It's interesting, Jason, that when we think of leadership, I don't know that this is where people would start, right? Learning to overcome obstacles. People think that leadership is telling people what to do. Mm-hmm. Do you agree?
I agree.
And you said nothing about telling anybody what to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In your definition or in your explanation of breaking it down. So it's growth, right? You mentioned being a good teammate first for young people, and then learning to be responsible, not saying, hey, you need to go lead right out of the gate, because they don't even know what that means, because I'm not sure that I knew what it meant until I heard you just talk about that. And I spent my whole life leading people. But growth in learning and outcomes and awareness and, then building the skills and habits that allow us to move into, to learn from our obstacles. One thing that you mentioned in this that took me back to a tip that I just wrote a couple weeks ago was just for today. You said, this is what we're going to do for today. And then we're going to take something from that and we're going to learn from it, whether it was a success or not, whichever way, and everything. We apply meaning to things. Things don't really have meanings. Like Kortney does not like to run. I do like to run. Running's not bad or good. It just is. Right. So, but when you said, you didn't necessarily say just for today, but I took that from Alcoholics Anonymous, which was actually started right here in Akron, where I am very close to. But getting through today and then figuring out how to use what we learned today for tomorrow, how do we continue to put ourselves in situations to learn to use those things to our advantage, I guess is the question that I'm looking for.
I think that it was interesting. I was talking to my my brother today, who's the head basketball coach at Mount Vernon Nazarene University, and he's got a 10-year-old son that he helps coach in certain sports, doesn't coach in other sports, and he and I talk about youth sports relentlessly. And I also had the opportunity to coach my daughter in 7th and 8th grade basketball, and I asked him the question. I said, well, what do you think about when we talk about leadership? Because I wanted to be a very authentic answer, and we were both on the same page about, well, I don't know if you really get into talking too much with very young athletes about what leadership is and is not. In several of your previous podcasts, you've mentioned leadership being, starting with self-leadership, right? And starting with personal responsibility. And, at his son's age of age 10, he talks about the responsibility of getting your equipment and your uniform ready to go for the game, right? And building that personal habit of taking care of yourself. And then learning, and this is what, as I was talking with my 7th and 8th grade girls basketball team, which was the joy of my life to coach my daughter for 2 seasons and have that, and also feel the pressure of, like, I hope I do a good job, right? And where we really talked so much, I never asked anybody to be a leader on that team, and we didn't have captains. I think there's a place for that when you get to higher levels, and I wouldn't, if there are captains of a youth sport team, I'm not going to argue against it, but I'm going to say that my choice was to not have captains, but was to build standards of behavior and standards of communication and standards of body language, and constantly revert back to those things so that it's an ongoing teaching process. So they really know, like, that what I'm evaluating and what I'm trying to help them with. And it starts with, and I think at the younger ages is how can you just be a good helper? So one, take care of yourself, your responsibilities. Make sure that you have your things organized. There's teachable moments that happen when you forget your glove, or you forget your bat, or you forget your shoes, right? Those are all teachable moments, and we get the opportunity as parents to go, what could we have done better to make ourselves more organized in that process to make sure that you have what you need for that game. And then there's a place of getting to the game and being the very best helper you can be. So if I was coaching a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, that's probably all we would talk about. And in the end, like, I know that I'm helping them understand the value of being a helper. And over time, as they continue through sport, hopefully, that they will take into account that when I'm a helper, I'm a great teammate. And when I'm a great teammate, I am now influencing others in a positive way. And when I'm influencing others in a positive way, my teammates are really enjoying that environment that I'm helping to cultivate. And then you get to the more complex places. But in the end, what are we hoping to do? We're trying to build habits that give us the opportunity to be great leaders. And I can, I'll stop there, but I can talk about the standards of behavior that we talk about, that I've worked on over time for such a long time, and how we used to come back around to that so often.
I'm gonna, one thing that you pointed out, and honestly, as an athlete getting recruited by Julie, like, you think of your you said standards of body language. That is not something that people think of. And I'm going to say even today, and all the business leaders that I interview on my other podcast, that people don't think body language associates with leadership. And it's just amazing to think, and you see 10-year-olds now, whether they're throwing their helmets or kicking a bleacher, but just how leadership isn't one thing. It isn't one lane. It is all encompassing. And you made me think differently just whenever you said standards of body language.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would love for you to dive into those standards a little bit deeper. As a mental performance coach, we talk about body language all the time, posture, right? I have 4 P's of peak performance, right? Being present, being productive, have productive, thoughts, posture, and then process. And that posture one is that posture not only has an effect mentally, but you can physiologically change things with your posture as well, which I talk to my athletes about all the time. But I'd love to hear your standards of behavior. You said of behavior, you said of body language, you said of communication, and there was something else. But dive into those for us, because I think this is important for young people to be thinking about how they behave because performance is a behavior. Performance is a behavior. Communication is a behavior. So understanding what their behaviors are in these areas can totally change their influence and their own performance. So let's hear what you have to say about your standards.
And I'll start with, when you mentioned the 4 Ps, that is a great framework for self-management and self-growth over what you were trying to navigate on the inside. And I would say these will then transition into a bit of how do we exude positive behaviors that help influence others or help influence the team? And these, what I actually call them the 6 E's now. They used to be the 5, but they're actually things that I've used with my own team of adults. I've used as an educational leader. And they're also things that I have, as a professional, as a parent, as a husband, as a person, on a daily basis. I go, these are the things that I am going to do my very best to show the world. I'm going to make sure that it shows up in my words. I'm going to make sure it shows up in my energy and my body language. And so that's how it navigated from, I used to call it the 5 E's of hard work. It's now become the standards of behavior, body language, and communication. And this was really great with my 7th and 8th grade girls basketball team that I was able to coach, because we weren't focused on the outcome. What I did want to have the opportunity to do is help them understand how their body language can support or hinder the perception that others may have of them, their own influence on others. And I'll break it down. I'll keep it very simple. It's effort, energy, enthusiasm, encouragement, execution, and elimination, which is the 6th one that I've added most recently. In effort, it's really about just talking about what it means to show or to articulate complete focus. Now, think about focus when it comes to youth athletes. That's a challenge, right? But at least we're coming back around to it, and we're talking about it, and we're trying to show what focus might look like in the way that you're listening, in the way that you are running from station to station, the way that you come onto the floor or the field. And then we have energy. That's where the positive body language comes in. You look like you are ready. You just have this energy about you that has a very positive presence amongst the team. And then enthusiasm is excitement for the success of others. And so you start with your effort, then you have your energy, which means your body language just looks like you're really happy to be there. And you certainly don't want to be the opposite of that, right? Your enthusiasm means this is where teachable moments come in, right? When somebody does something that we have deemed as positive, be it outcome, be it attitude, be it effort, whatever it may be, you have the ability to say and to be excited for their success. Like there's a selflessness involved there. And then we get to encouragement, which many of coaches have said, and I'm sure you've said it as well, that there's always the word courage within the word encouragement. And that is a really important thing for a coach, for a parent, for kids to be able to understand that regardless of your ability level, your talent, to have the courage to go tell somebody else, you did a good job right there. I really appreciate what you just did. means that you're worthy of that. And so if we can cultivate and create team environments in which every single one of our athletes, whether they're the most talented player on the team or not, they all have the courage and the worthiness to say, I can go tell somebody they did a good job. And then also providing feedback to others and taking that particular feedback as well. And then there's execution, which is in the world of conscientiousness. I love the word conscientiousness. It means I'm going to do my very best work today, and I'll try to improve on that work tomorrow. But how we talk about that in sport is show me through your actions that when we do that particular warm-up or that particular drill, you are almost going to exaggerate the actions that show me that you're trying to do your very best in your movement, in the way that we execute everything, the way that we sit on the bench, the way that we come out of the locker room onto the floor. I just want to see you're trying to execute everything. And then the last is elimination, probably one of the most challenging at this point, which is why I added in there. I call it the elimination of debts, but debts is not D-E-B-T-S, it is D-E-T-S-S. And debts are D is distraction, E is embarrassment, T is taunting, S is sarcasm, and the other S is self-pity. And the elimination of distraction, quite the challenge for all of us at this point in time. But I think even with that challenge, our ability to at least talk about it and the importance of not only eliminating distraction personally, but as a leader or as a coach, trying to figure out ways in which within that particular environment, you can put all other distractions aside, so we can really focus and have fun within our practice or our game. The embarrassment piece, and you've probably seen this, Coach Jones, with Coach K. He had a no fear, no embarrassment policy concept with his Duke basketball team that I read in his, I think it was his 2001 national championship book. And I've taken that with me everywhere. I think that's one of the biggest obstacles that every young person, every athlete faces, is the understanding that embarrassment is not, nobody technically can embarrass you. You can only feel embarrassment. But when you do, when you talk about mental performance, I mean, think about how embarrassment can sideline you mentally for a long period of time. Like, how do you climb out of that? How do you navigate? How do you develop a mindset around it? But then for us as coaches is like, how do you ensure that they know that everybody has been in that particular situation? We understand it and we're going to make our way out of it. And then we get to the taunting piece, which I just, as a coach, I just say, look, that's a bad language, right? And that's also a distracted language, and it's also a non-productive language, and it means that we're not focused on the very, very next play. Sarcasm, while funny at times, I think is not a great leadership language to use. And I think it can be detrimental over time because it puts people on their heels because they don't know when you're going to use that sarcasm and when you're not. And then the self-pity piece is really more, I have always been one that have never wanted anybody to feel sorry for me. And I also don't want, as a teammate, it doesn't mean that we don't go through sad moments as young athletes, right? Or challenges, but our ability to be able to climb out of that for the sake of our team is a good trust builder. Now, so one thing we used to do when I was the high school basketball coach and a college coach is we actually built rubrics around this. We would self-evaluate, we would peer evaluate, I would evaluate, they would evaluate me. And it was this constant language around these 6 E's. And I always felt that if we got ourselves to a place of everybody was pretty good at these 6 E's, that I felt like we had a good organization or a good team or a good group. And it was just something that we could always talk about with my 7th and 8th grade girls basketball team. And they always had examples, and they always wanted to be good at these things. And they always wanted to be praised for these things. And they always wanted to learn from these things. And it had nothing to do with the outcome on the floor.
We talked to JP Nurbin in past episodes, and it was all about culture. Right. And this is establishing culture around 6 E's. And if you were and you can have these things posted, I work with a coach who has 4 R's, right? Relational, respect, ready, and then responsible, right? And she has those everywhere. I have a sweatshirt that has them on there. And this is sweatshirt worthy for sure. You think about enthusiasm. Patrick Murphy at the University of Alabama talks about mutita. And it's an African word, an African way of behavior that says, I'm as excited about your success as I am about mine. And that's what he builds his teams around. If you read the book, Help the Helper, that's where it came from. But it's very, it's, the foundation of how they want to treat each other. And then what you said about, no embarrassment, I think every feeling that you are going to feel in a big game or in any situation, you've already felt these feelings before in your life, and you've made it through them before. If we forget, they just change. I heard a psychologist talk about it. He said, you just need, an ordinary performance on a important day or a special day. But that embarrassment, I think that's so important because that is the first thing that kids feel. And making them understand, it's not like you can't be embarrassed. It's just that it doesn't serve you.
Right.
Because it is exactly it's the D, it's a distraction. Right? And emotions coming.
And you referenced the great study on female executive leaders, CEOs in the past, the percentage of them that were involved in team sports. And this is really where the concept of endless teachable moments came from. The book, an expression on the art and education of sport, because I knew that I had a really unique athletic experience. I was a coach's son. He was a very, very successful college and high school basketball coach. I was born into that. I had some experiences along the way in which my sport became a community for me. It became a structure. It became a friend. It became something that not only was I obsessed with, but it was something that helped me overcome loss and different types of adversity along the way. And I also was very lucky, and I think very blessed to have what I thought was a really incredible youth sport experience, but also have the outcome. Like, that's lucky, I think. The outcome being, being a 2-sport Division I scholarship athlete and playing a little bit of professional baseball. Like, that's an outcome that we as parents should not expect. And we really shouldn't even focus on that. I know that's, you've probably said that in every episode that you've had. We should not be focused on the outcome, but we have this window of time in which this experience, regardless of your ability level, I've always believed that we have this window of time in which children can extract the most amount of values and positive experiences and failure along the way in a really safe setting. And so, my assumption would be, if you did that study on executive leaders or really any leaders and the number of them that played team sports for a long period of time, it might come back down to the place of, I had so many opportunities to fail and succeed and overcome both. Right. That's what from an endless teachable moment standpoint. And it's one of the reasons that I really love coaching, is that there's winning and losing, and we must overcome both, and oftentimes together. And we have to learn the process of that. And all of the opportunities for growth in sport, those teachable moments are endless. And I've seen, in the educational setting, I've seen so many times, and this is really important for parents to understand, so many times that I've seen young teachers that have come into our high school network that had every academic accolade you could imagine in high school. They went to an Ivy League school. They have not failed often at all. And then you come into an educational setting in Chicago, in which we have a lot of obstacles and a lot of barriers and a lot of years that we have to make up with children when they get to the high school level. And that is really hard. There's nothing more humbling than being a first-year teacher that all of a sudden realized, like, I let my people down today. And I've seen so often those super high achievers have an immense struggle with failure or tough feedback or the lack of results, in a way that I have also anecdotally seen those that did not have the academic accolades or did not attend the Ivy League school, who are teachers who bounce back the next day because they were a team sport athlete. They've been there before. They knew how they overcame it. It wasn't easy on the front end, but over time, they built the habits of overcoming and resilience to go, I'm going to roll my shoulders back today, and I'm going to do better today. I'm going to learn from yesterday, and they become great multifaceted educators. And so I think that's a really important lesson as we think about the actual journey of sport, is truly about all the things that we get to overcome and we get to enjoy and we get to experience along the way that help mold us into people that have the potential of being resilient in the future.
Kortney, are you going? Because I'm going to ask a question. If you're not going to,
You can ask. I'm just soaking it all in here. I'm just excited and listening. So you can go.
So Jason, when we talk about failure, and you mentioned these high level people that come in that have a hard time managing it because they haven't experienced it too much. I remember asking one of our former players who was a chief medical director of a hospital in California, has her own practice now. I remember asking, you haven't failed much, have you? Right. And she had never failed, although, medical school is hard, and she bounced back and has done amazing things. But high level people often don't fail. And I feel that is something we're taking away from kids even more today. Right. I used to be helicopter parents, and I was listening to John O'Sullivan, who does the Way of Champions podcast. And he had somebody on that said they're jackhammer parents now because they just like rip everything down in order to build it up so that their kids don't have to fail. If we're talking directly to athletes, how can we encourage athletes to embrace some failure, or maybe make it seem, help them to understand that it is a normal part of growth? I don't know. Where could you take something like that if you're talking directly to athletes, say, hey, look, and then insert advice?
Right. I think that you begin with talking about, I think you make it more realistic for them. I think that you paint the picture, and I'm maybe speaking from a coaching lens, which is hard for me not to do, but you paint the picture of things that are likely to happen in sport. You basically say, this is going to happen. An example outside of sport is when I was, as an assistant principal, I would talk to an entire grade level of freshmen, and I would talk about our, no fear and no embarrassment. And I would say, it doesn't mean that fear is not going to exist. Let's acknowledge that it's there. It doesn't mean embarrassment's not going to exist, but let's acknowledge that it's going to be a thing. And I would say, one of you on your first day of school is going to wear the wrong shoe to school, and you're going to have to navigate that, right? One of you is going to trip going up the stairs around 500 people that you've never met before, and you feel like your life is now socially over because of that thing. So we're painting that picture for them to go, and that's going to happen, and it's going to be okay. With young athletes, sport by sport, I think you paint the picture of, you are going to strike out. And let's talk about how that feels when we strike out. You are going to make a turnover. If you're talking to the super young athletes, like, well, what's a turnover? It means that you did something in which the ball now goes to the other team, right? And it's going to feel like a mistake. And I think you have to be very specific and proactive as parents, as coaches, so that they don't go into any setting and simply just expect for it all to go really, really well. And if you can get them to a place of actually visualizing, here's a mistake that's going to happen, and let's begin the process of just practicing how we respond to that. Mm-hmm. And that's where I get to the place of the only two core values I've said I feel like really should exist for teams, and I think they could even exist on an accessible youth level, are poise and toughness. And the way that I paint those two things are just saying, poise is our proactive mindset, knowing that adversity and mistakes are going to happen. Let's be real with it right now. Those things are going to exist. And then toughness is the habits we build in reacting to them. So poise is the proactive, toughness is the reactive. Let's continue to develop ways in which we're growing in both of those particular areas, because if you grow in your poise, it probably helps you become tougher a little bit quicker. And when you become tougher a little bit quicker after that mistake that's going to happen, you now can respond from a mental standpoint better. And then your teammates and your coaches are going to trust you more, because they're going to go, no, that mistake's not going to shut them down for the rest of the game, that they're going to be able to bounce back and they're going to be okay. And we trust that. And then that kind of helps you create like a really positive environment.
And without those things, leadership is impossible because you're not helping.
And you're not helping, right?
You're not helping.
And our 8U baseball team, let's be a group of good helpers, right? Let's not be dynamic leaders right now, right? Let's be a group of good helpers.
I think this level, the athletes today, and let's say a higher level, like I love to stay in the 8 to 11U because that's where my kids are. But they experience different challenges than the high school and the college athletes. And seeing the state runs right now in baseball, softball, where they are in tournaments. We never had this, but like when you talk about distractions, there are more distractions now for these athletes than ever before. And it's not just Susie's mom chirping or, Lavon's aunt, but there's also now social media and what people are saying. How do athletes overcome that as they look at, because this is the real world and experience. So they're not only getting this from their team, they're getting this from parents, they're getting this from an outer circle of community. I, like you, had a wonderful experience in athletics and I was truly blessed. But I look at all the outside pressures of becoming a leader and navigating sports today, like that is so much harder in that lens than we ever had to deal with. What recommendations do you have for outside of our inner circles?
Right. Without question, it almost seems like an impossible challenge these days because we have less and less control of the outside environment. And I think that as a coach, coaching prior to the social media age and being an athlete prior to the social media age and then navigating through it, it is without question, it's an enormous challenge. All I can say is what my attempt would be. And one is that, I have a 16-year-old that doesn't have social media still. Right. And so, it doesn't mean that if you do prior to this point, like I don't have a disagreement with that. It's just it's a choice that we've made. And, but with that, though, I would still go through the process of being very specific about what will happen. There will be a negative comment. There will be a point in which you made a mistake and it's going to show up in places and it's going to be posted. And those are things that we're going to have to navigate together. And, I really like the let them, philosophy, like let them say that, right? And let them do that. Here's the values that we're going to focus on. And I think as you get into the high school level with athletes, helping them begin the process of developing their own core values, I think is really good. I think that there's a place in which we can articulate our own core values and hope that we've done enough with those core values over time that they also become part of their core values. But I think giving them the opportunity to create their own core values and then putting in there something about the poise and toughness piece as it relates to both sport and as it relates to both the external environment around sport at that time. That would be my attempt, right? That's not based on any research or evidence, but it's really like the best try that I would give.
It's crazy navigating everything now. So I love that. It's great advice. Thanks so much for joining us on Game Changers Athlete Edition. Remember, champions aren't born. They're built through dedication, perseverance, and the right mindset. If you found value in today's episode, share it with a teammate, with a coach, or someone who could benefit from this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast and follow us on social media for exclusive content and daily motivation. Until next time, keep pushing your limits and stay focused on becoming the game changer you're meant to be.